Welcome to episode 4 of the MicaSense podcast. This is your host, Drew. I'm here with my co-host, Stephen Mangum. Stephen, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good today, Drew. It's good to hear from you.
You've been busy capturing some sample data, right? You guys just came back from a trip to, where was that?
We're at Fort Casey on Whidbey Island over here in Washington State. We got connected with someone who has been doing a lot of work with archaeology, and they're trying to figure out, among other things, where the barracks used to be on this old fort and where the lighthouse used to be before it was moved. And so we flew Altum over that area, and the data is looking pretty good. And then we also flew the dual camera over a little corner of a lake over there. And yeah, it was great to get out in the field. It was very cold. A good reminder that it's the cold time of the year. But it's great to be not cooped up at home and get out there, talk to some people. There are lots of looky-loos out there, probably the most we've ever seen. Every 10, 15 minutes, there was someone asking us some questions.
Oh, while you were flying, people were coming up to you asking questions.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we were like at this parking lot at this really picturesque fort, and people who live on the island just coming by and doing a drive or walking their dog. And it was just a lot of people were really curious.
That dual cam and Altum data set that you guys collected, are we going to be able to get that up on the viewer for the public to see?
Yeah, I think so. Callum is processing it right now. It's going to be pretty good.
All right, well, let's get into today's episode. Today we have a couple of interesting guests. First is Stratten Swanner from Axis Agriculture in Jacksonville, Florida. And then we also have Nathan Oman on the call from Skyview 3D. So both of these individuals are drone service providers. And today we're going to talk a little bit about that aspect of multispectral imaging, the drone service provider side of things. So welcome, guys. I think maybe to start out, I'll just ask each of you to introduce yourself, give us some context for your drone business, and then we'll take it from there. So Nathan, why don't you go first?
Okay, so I grew up here in Southwest Michigan, and I started taking classes a while back at Michigan State University in collaboration with a local college. And in doing that, we had a class that was an elective that was drones in agriculture, and it was the first one that they did. So that's kind of how I got into this field. I took that elective, and going to school to learn about fruit and vegetable crop management, I kind of took off with the drones and agriculture portion because it appealed to me as a way to help introduce technology into the agricultural industry and work with a variety of local growers. The thing I liked about it the most was that, I could work with any type of crops, not just a specific crop as fruit and vegetables. So since I got started in all this, I've been, as far as South America, working with independent ag researchers there. Done some work in Florida. I was just out in Arizona to do a training for NOAA, who bought a piece of equipment. So I trained them on how to use that. So it's really opened up a lot of opportunities.
I think a lot of times when people get into drone services, they start out with an interest in the drone. And in your case, you've got a background in agriculture. I also saw on LinkedIn, I don't think we've ever really talked about this before in our past conversations, but you're a property manager and grower at, what is it? How do you say that?
Yeah, McWethy Farms here in Three Oaks. It's a greenhouse facility that was designed for hydroponic tomatoes. It's a state-of-the-art place. Yeah, and actually getting into the drone industry, I wasn't interested in the drone itself when the elective came along. I wasn't even interested in taking the elective. My program coordinator kind of told me, well, there's nobody from Southwest taking it, and I really want you to take it, so I'm going to sign you up. So I was like, oh, I don't really want to do this because I think drones are kind of overrated, but it really opened my eyes to a lot of different opportunities taking that class. I didn't realize all the different things that you could do with the sensors and all that, so it was kind of funny.
Yeah, what is it about college advisors where they're pressuring you into taking courses? I feel like we've all experienced
it was more of she had some personal interest. She needed somebody from her district to go and do this class, so she probably thought I was, the most willing to do it. And I had a scholarship a pretty large scholarship from a
Okay.
casino in town here, so she knew that I had the funds to do it as well.
Yeah,
So
they were holding that over your head. They'd
yeah,
get
she
you a
basically
second
said,
life.
"Oh, well, I'm going to sign you up to do it, and you're going to go." So.
Well, yeah, let's move over to Stratten. So Stratten, give us an idea on how, why you started Axis Agriculture.
So it all started. We'd just come back from in our service. We have something called holiday routine, where you go on like a holiday break, or you work like every 1 in 4 days. We just come back from that, and we do this big safety stand up before we start flying again and everything. And me and my business partner, we were sitting next to each other, and he goes, "Man, I had this great idea to start spraying crops with drones." I was like, "Man, that's a great idea." And then I just took it and ran. And what I found out was, well, I think it'd be more effective as a business decision, maybe to do multispectral imaging first and then move to spraying after, just to kind of get our bearings in the industry. Well, so that's what we did. And we bought the Matrice 200 and then the MicaSense. And then we come out here, guns a-blazing, and find out that, well, in Florida, all of their plant seasons are opposite of everyone else. So they plant over fall and winter and into the spring, and then do cover crops in the summer. So I hit them at the end of a plant. So that's kind of, but it was kind of good because, I made some good contacts, but then I had to
Sure.
wait 6 months before I could do anything really. And now that we've hit the plant, it's just been crazy.
You're in the Coast Guard, right?
Yeah, I'm
And you're
active
doing
duty.
this
Yep.
okay. And you're doing this as kind of like filling in the gaps for that.
Yeah, we do this on the side and to kind of grow it while we're still active duty. So, not all of my eggs are in one basket.
And so you have a business partner who's also in the Coast Guard?
Yep, we
Okay.
both are.
You've been kind of branching into some other aspects of technology and ag, right? Not necessarily
Yeah,
drones specifically. Can you talk about that a little
yes.
bit?
Yeah, so we also do we'll do like conversions of, let's say, a standard granular spreader, and we'll make it a variable rate spreader, precision planters, and then we've been doing a lot of zoning of fields, so we can do Haney soil health analysis testing, and then also SAP analysis testing on the actual plant. And then we work with Mitchell Hora at Continuum Ag out of Iowa. He's basically our agronomist that makes all the recommendations after we get the analysis back. So it kind of grew into a love of just helping the grower manage soil health and plant health. And I think the drone is one of the biggest key aspects of that, being able to monitor the crop, especially as you go into almost proving that these systems that we're putting in place are working. So that's kind of how it grew, is like, okay, well, I have this way to prove all of this, and so why not use it, and then just surround yourself around people that are just complete experts in the field. I mean, I don't even know how I met half these people, but I have, and they'll sit there and fire hose you with information, and you're just like, whoa, you got to time out, slow down. But it's great. It's great for the grower. It's great for me. It's great for the business. So that's kind of really why I got into it.
It seems like you started out doing the multispectral imagery and you've continued to add layers onto that just based on what the farmer is asking from you. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah. I mean, and some of it is education. Where we are, there's zero precision agriculture. And so educating them on all of this and bringing in all these other experts to kind of explain why the testing is beneficial and how it can help them in the long run really, really helps out. And then the drone is just an added bonus for it all.
Are you guys doing starting to get into like equipment sales or hardware sales, or are you sticking mainly to the data delivery on this?
Yes, we do some equipment sales. That we work with Ag Leader.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I used to work at an Ag Leader dealer, actually.
Yeah, so we're a dealer with Ag Leader, and Yeah, we do. I mean, I'm the one who does all the installs, so which is fine. I actually like doing that, but
I remember enjoying doing that as well. It's like it's very satisfying. You start out with a bunch of boxes with components, and at the end of the day, you've got a working system.
right. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, it all stems from aviation because, I'm an aircraft mechanic, so I love getting the complex jobs and you fix it, or like a plane comes back broken, we fix it, and then it goes back out flying as a safe aircraft. So it's around the same thing where it's just like you get a spreader or a planner or whatever, and you make this thing just like really smart,
Yeah.
and it can tell you everything. So it's great.
When we talk to service providers, I know my colleague Brian Hall he used to be a drone service provider until he started with MicaSense, but he gets a lot of incoming leads from prospective service providers who want to buy a multispectral camera and start getting into agriculture. And one of their biggest, one of the most common questions is just like, how do I get started? Who do I talk to? What kind of farmers do I pursue? I know, I mean, one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you guys is because I know you've been successful in actually capturing multispectral data and selling it to farmers. Like they've actually paid you money. So that's basically, I mean, that's a big draw, I think, for a lot of service providers out there is like, what are you doing to be successful? Can you give us some anecdotal stories about approaching those first few farmers and what those conversations were like? Maybe Nathan, we could start with you and then move over to Stratten.
Yeah, so when I first got into this industry, I was working with a company who's still around, Skyflight Robotics. They do primarily equipment sales. And Drew probably remembers coming up to Michigan and setting up a presentation in the basement of a winery with some local
that was great.
growers.
We got a bunch of free wine.
Yeah, after the fact. But that's where I started. I started with wine growers, grape growers, and I've been doing that for 4 years. So that's kind of an interesting start, was going to a winery and talking to them about different, opportunities with ag mapping, and we set up some fields, and I'm still doing some of that for them. They've transitioned what they use the data for from year to year, but it's still working out in their benefit.
What other crops have you been working in up in Michigan?
So I'm in a unique area here because there's a lot of row crops, and then also the fruit belt kind of runs through here. So there's a narrow strip that runs north to south along the lake. It's about 20 miles wide, where it's pretty heavily planted with tree crops, mostly apples, peaches, and cherries up in Traverse City. So I've done a little bit of all of that, not any sizable amount of one specific crop, though. Not really anything with the row crops here, because most of the farmers here, they're 20 or 30 acre fields, and they're old school, and they don't have, GPS equipment and that type of thing. So mostly the specialty crops. But I've worked with oranges down in Florida, and then obviously down in Brazil, we did everything there: sugarcane, coffee, soy, pineapples.
So in any one of those circumstances or crops, what was the dialogue like? I mean, how did you connect with the actual farmer, orchard manager or what have you?
Everything's a little different. The grape growers really like being able to see the growth of the vines, along the row without having to visually inspect every row. Grapes are tough because in order to see what's going on in the vineyard, they have to walk up and down pretty much every row, and that's not an easy thing to do. With some of the other crops, let's see, the coffee in Brazil was a real interesting one, because when they plant an area for coffee, they plant the coffee plants like 16 inches apart, and it's all manual labor there. So after they plant the coffee plants, they go back out 2 weeks later and they actually count how many were dead or how many weren't successful. And it takes somebody like 4 weeks to go out and hand count all of these. So we were able to do just a fraction of a field in a couple of hours. So that was a really interesting way to save them money, so they could just get their counts that way to replant.
So it's just an efficiency thing, basically.
Yeah, just time saving, really.
So Nathan, are you personally flying all of these projects, or do you have anyone who you're subcontracting with or anything like that?
No, I do everything myself, and I've done some subcontracting work for a few other companies. There's a company down in Florida, and then also I've done some work for Aerobotics, quite a bit of work, and I'm a reseller
Okay.
for Aerobotics, so.
Oh, that's great. And
I'm
so,
excited
like, in
to
the case
listen to
of
the podcast that came out today. So when we get off this, that's the first thing I'm going to do. Yeah, I
That's
will.
great.
And I listened to the first two podcasts last week, and I loved every minute of it. It was great, especially hearing about the stuff in
Great
South
commercial.
America. Yeah, it was great to hear about the stuff in South America because I've been there and I could really relate. You were talking to the guy from Argentina, and it was a very relatable conversation. I've got a meeting tonight with my guys in Brazil to tell them, hey, you have to listen to this.
So in the case of Brazil, did you bring your own equipment down there, or did you fly with their equipment?
I did. I brought my own equipment down there. We're working towards a partnership. They're an independent ag research company, so I was kind of giving them some insights on how to use this technology in their research fields. And the first time we went to Brazil, it was more of an introduction. They brought Skyflight Robotics, me and James from Skyflight down there, and they just wanted to show us what they're doing and everything. It was really impressive. We met them in Florida, and then 3 weeks later, me and James were getting on a plane to go to Brazil, all expenses paid, to meet somebody that we've only met once in Florida. So it was kind of an interesting introduction. But we went down there, and what they're doing down there is a lot. They're working with some of the big companies like Syngenta, Bayer, and they're doing independent ag research for them. So they're starting to incorporate the multispectral portion of things into their research and reports.
So Stratton, how about you? I know just based on a few conversations we've had in the past, you have kind of like a large critical client who's sort of gotten you started into all this. Am I correct on that?
Yeah. So we work very closely with a farm here, L&M in Palatka, and they've had some people come down here and sell them things and stuff like that, and it hasn't been great experiences for them. So I think going back to your question, like one of the things that I think made me like a quick success was I have a very no BS approach, and I'm not gonna sell you anything unless I believe in it 100%, or I'm not gonna suggest anything unless I believe in it. And I've had a lot of people that have approached me, especially within the soil health and everything like that, to use their product and whatnot. And product sounds great on paper and it's worked for other people, but who knows if it's going to work here? I don't know because I don't have the full story of their soil and plants yet, and neither does Mitchell. And so we're not going to recommend anything that is either A, going to hurt the plant, or B, not going to work, and it ends up being a waste of money. And I think that also, like, buying the drone and buying a camera is one thing, but knowing how to properly use it is another. And I mean, I don't know how many flights that we flew in the beginning that I go home or I process it right there in the field, and the imaging just looks terrible. And it's like, if I wouldn't have learned those lessons in the beginning, I mean, I would have been, I'm charging these people however much per acre, and it's like I give them an end product and it looks like crap. It's like, oh man, now I feel terrible. So I flew a field 3 times. I remember talking to you about that, how our Matrice was acting up, and we came out to the same field 4 times to fly it to get this thing going. And I mean, we were just having so many issues. It was a mess, but I mean, just being willing to get out there and test your drone, test your imaging and all that type of stuff. I think it's good. And then I think having a no BS approach and just being straight, just being as honest as you can with everybody.
Those flights that you had to redo, that it was just a pure like data quality issue. It wasn't drone problems, because I feel like I've gone to the field to do some test flights in the past, and it's always like, oh shoot, I gotta update this firmware, or the drone won't take off because it needs to be calibrated or something like that.
Or you forgot your panel.
Yeah, or I forgot that little like what is it, the lightning cable that goes from the iPad to the controller. Gosh, those are sad days.
The worst.
That's what we bought, like 20 of those, and just put them everywhere.
Yeah. And then
Yeah,
they
that's the
still
best
go
thing.
missing.
Yeah, that's funny. But yeah, it was straight data.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, also like wind. I mean, you'd be amazed at, hey, my drone can fly at up to 12 meters per second in wind. And then you're like, great. And then you go fly it and you get your imaging back and it looks terrible. And you're like, well, that's not going to work. So then you just got to play with it and figure out, okay, if I have a strong wind, do I fly at 10 meters a second or do I fly at 6 and just
Gotcha.
eat the battery? And that's it's just things you don't think about. You're like, oh, great, I got 6 sets of batteries. I can do 500, 600 acres a day, and it's a complete different story when you get out there and you got wind, and then there goes your batteries, and you're scrambling to try to get these DJI batteries that feels like 15 hours to charge to try to charge back up so you can keep flying throughout the day. Yeah, it's just little things that you got to just figure out as you go, I guess. And it's frustrating, but it is what it is.
The first time you showed the Red Edge data to this main client of yours, what was his response, or where did he see the benefit?
His response was, wow, I thought this field was a bumper crop field, and it doesn't look like it on your camera. Went and actually ground truthed it, and it wasn't. So I think they lost it's a 73-acre field, and they lost about, I think, around 10 acres. And due to moisture that they didn't know was there. It was just, they were just dead. So there was we got no data back from that section of the field. And they were pretty shocked by that.
So is that what led you into some of this other hardware support and sales? Is like, how do we fix that problem, or what did they eventually do to that wet spot?
Well, they haven't done anything yet. Yeah, I mean, it kind of did, but it kind of didn't. What kind of led me in that direction was I actually watched Minnesota Millennial Farmer, and Mitchell was on one of his YouTube videos, and he was talking about plant health and soil health, and I just called him, and we got to talking, and we developed a great friendship over these past few months, and it like fueled my fire. And then also working with the University of Florida on this phosphorus trial on potatoes was another thing that really pushed me to get into all the other side of precision ag.
So Mitchell, he's the guy at the company in Iowa, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So was he doing work in Florida already? Was he like creating prescriptions or reports or whatever for Florida farmers already?
No. Nope.
Okay.
He thinks it's interesting that they farm in the soil that they farm in. I mean, it's pretty much sand, and they have some clay areas in some spots, but I mean, it is sand, and he's just like, it's just amazing how they do what they do. So if we can benefit them in creating a better environment for these plants, as far as soil goes, that's just going to be, it's going to be crazy. And we already know we're going to be able to do it. It's just proving that we can do it is the big thing.
So Stratton, do you have any other, you mentioned data quality issues you experienced. Do you have any other tips for customers or users of MicaSense cameras to improve their data quality or not degrade it?
Yeah, so I don't fly perpendicular to the rows because every time I've done it, I get terrible data. But that could be where I'm at. I mean, who knows? So I mean, sometimes like thinking maybe outside of the box and not, I mean, you guys say fly perpendicular to the rows. Well, I did that twice, and not in the beginning. I did it like towards the kind of the middle when we were testing everything, and my data came back really streaky, really streaky data. So I was like, okay, well, it was because we had some wind that day, but it wasn't very much wind. And so then I flew one field with the row, and then we flew it again perpendicular with the row. I got great data. The other way, I got streaky data. So it was just kind of like, okay, well, maybe for us, it works to fly with. And then again, like I said, playing with speeds, playing with altitude is a big one. I go out there, if we have let's say a broccoli field, it's got 4 weeks of growth on it. I will go to different spots of the field and physically measure plants to try to get an average of how big the plant is. And then I know, okay, I need to I don't need to be flying at 400, I'll fly at 2, and I'll do like an 80% overlap, and I'll get great imagery out of that. So, and then as the plant grows, obviously I just creep up higher and higher to where I can fly at 400 and be good to go.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, that
pretty
makes sense.
interesting. I wouldn't have thought of doing that. Just like, what's my, what GSD should I capture? I'm just gonna go measure some plants and then determine what GSD I need, which is gonna
Yeah.
determine the
And
AGL that I fly at. Yeah.
y'all's calculator on y'all's website is a perfect tool for that. If you can kind of see, okay, I'm getting so many, I do it by inches per pixel. So I get so many inches per pixel.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say the plant is 2 inches. I just go in the calculator and I figure out what my AGL needs to be. And then I fly it and make sure, and then when I process the data, I make sure everything's good. And I'd say 99% of the time, if you use the calculator, everything's great. Everything works out perfect.
Nathan, what kind of AGL are you shooting for with the orchard stuff up in Michigan?
It really depends as well. I've actually been processing the vineyard stuff through aerobotics. So they require, I think it's like 250 feet.
How frequently are you flying for a particular customer?
For me, it depends on the crop. If the customer's just looking for plant counts for whatever reason, mostly in the trees or orange groves, just once a year. But if you're looking at plant health on the vineyards, I was doing every 2 weeks during a wet time where they may have a downy or powdery mildew issue. So more frequently during those environmental conditions, and then less frequently during certain parts of the season. So I guess it really just depends on what you're trying to obtain.
Is that what you're seeing too, Stratten?
No, we suggest, once I'm able to fly, as far as the size, and the early growth, we'll fly anywhere from 10 to 14 days, depending on the crop. And then I'll keep that going for about a month, maybe a month and a half. And then I kind of space it like weekly. So I'll go like 10 to 14 days, and then 21 days, and then a month. I'll fly once. And then if they have an issue, or if they think they have something happening, I'll come out, same day or that next morning and fly again for them. So it's just really to monitor the overall growth of the plant. So, because the fields here are pretty, the biggest one that we fly is 80 acres. So they do a good job of monitoring what it looks like, and they have a good understanding of what all their fields are doing at any given time. But there could be things pop up, rain. I mean, there's a field, for instance, they planted it. So you plant broccoli. These seeds they're like tiny. They're like half a millimeter. They're so small, and they plant them at a 3/8 inch depth. And then so they planted this field, and then the next day they got 4 inches of rain. So we come in and we fly it, and you can just see how much the rain affected the growth of those plants. I mean, it's 50 acres. There's probably 20 of it that has no plants growing because the seeds were just washed away. So that's another good way to, after a heavy rain, and you allow the plants to grow, then you can go in and see what your stand is.
What pricing models are you using? Nathan, do you want to go first?
Gosh, I've played around with the price a lot depending on the grower. I've been able to obtain anywhere from like $10 to $15 an acre for plant counts. And then general multispectral imaging. When I started out, the first year I did stuff for the winery. I did it for $1 an acre just to give them some incentive and like a trial run. And then I've had them all the way up to, I don't know, somewhere between $5 and $10 an acre, just for multispectral only.
And are you just handing the data over to them, or are you analyzing it, or are you processing it? And what's your deliverable?
So I was processing it and doing like every data set I would collect, I would get on like a Skype meeting with them and go over what I interpreted out of it. And then obviously they would be responsible for doing the ground truthing on it.
And you've mentioned aerobotics a few times. Is that kind of your platform of choice, like deliverable, or what software are you using for the processing and the analytics?
I really like aerobotics for plant counts, I guess, in certain circumstances, especially trees. A lot of growers have a hard time with that price point, I guess. So it's great for some growers, not so good for others. And then just for general multispectral or RGB processing, I use an online platform that I like called Solvy. And then there's a couple other good analytical softwares that I've played around with. I haven't used them a lot, but MicaSense. You guys work with them.
Fluorosat or MicaSense?
Well, the product is MicaSense.
Yeah.
Oh,
The
okay.
company is Fluorosat.
Yep. So yeah, I've toyed around with that a little bit, and my partners down in Brazil have used it as well.
Stratten, what about you? Pricing, and then what are your preferred software solutions?
I charge $4 an acre. And then I use Pix4D fields to do all my processing. And then if I need to do specialized data processing, I do use QGIS.
Okay, cool. Are you have you checked out any of those videos from Callum on our end on QGIS, or did you basically teach all this stuff to yourself?
I use some. I haven't looked at any of the ones on there. Actually, I'll do that. But I did it all from Pix4D. Has some good ones on like false color composites and how to make them in there, because that's like super effective here, because these guys are professional weed growers. So being able to like track their weeds, like with a new herbicide, I can like kind of figure out like how effective it actually is without them having to ground truth the whole field, because I can see the difference of plant type. But I use them, and then just I feel like a million hours of research on how to do like by bed data for like NDRE data and everything like that over the period of a growth. So for that, I call that custom, and I'll do it like $6 an acre for that. If I'm going to be tracking like a fertilizer or doing false color composites, that's what I'll do for that.
Yeah, the false color composites in QGIS are so fun to play with, and just like basically looking at that histogram and honing in on specific reflectance values that you're gonna see for each spectral band. I mean, I think that's the most like visually satisfying outputs that I've personally created, is the custom composites and like creating visualizations that really distinguish the different plant species from one another. You mentioned spray drones earlier on in the call. Is that something you guys are going to implement? And the reason I bring that up is just the custom composites are a great way to identify weeds, like you said.
Yeah, we are definitely going to do that. It's good to be kind of like a one-stop shop per se. So you fly the field, you see a potential issue, you ground truth it first to double check it, make sure everything jives, and then you grab that spray drone right out of your trailer, and whoever comes out here gives you the product you need, and you can instantly go spray it same day. So, or early the next morning, depending on like time and how big the field is, if you need to spray the whole field. So yeah, spray drones are coming. The goal is to get one. We're going to get HSE probably in the next couple months, and then hopefully very soon after that we're going to have 3. We're going to swarm them. That's kind of the goal right now. I think we're going to spread seed with it as well. So that'll be fun to do.
HSE UAV, they're a group that they were in Oregon, right? And then they moved to Florida. Am I right about that?
Yeah, they're
US
just north of Orlando. Yeah, they're good. They're really good people, and they have some great YouTube videos showcasing their sprayers, and they really go over everything. What I really like about it is there's no remote. It's all flown off a laptop with a base station, and I mean it's like playing a video game. If you have to manually maneuver it, you use the WASD keys and you just move it like that. I mean it's awesome. So I'm really excited for us to get a sprayer. I think it's gonna be a good thing for these guys down here during the rainy season, and then also just a spot spray real quick whenever we find an issue. We're starting to finally get to a point where spray drones are actually worth using. Because before there was, the tanks were so small and your battery life was so little that it was like you'd be up in the air for like 2 minutes, and then you have to come back and swap batteries and refill your tank. And now we're starting to get bigger and bigger tanks and bigger batteries. And
yeah, it does seem like the use of these things has improved greatly, like in 2020 specifically. I want to go back just a little bit. So Nathan, you mentioned sometimes you use like aggressive pricing to get your foot in the door with a grower. You mentioned like $1 an acre. Is that something that you use pretty commonly? Like Stratten, are you using that method as well to get in the door? Or what? I'd be interested to hear your answer to that. And then also, do you have any examples of kind of like failing for a prospective client, basically offering a deliverable and they're just kind of like, this really isn't too impressive, not interested?
Yeah, so the aggressive pricing, I kind of actually found that to be a little bit more counterintuitive. It seems like when a grower has a little bit more skin in the game, they tend to pay a little bit more attention. If you kind of just give them something for free, they just, if they're really interested, then yeah, they'll utilize it and check it out and that kind of thing. But if you're trying to sell a product to somebody who's not that interested, but they're kind of interested, a little bit, more standard pricing and a smaller, like a trial area seems to work good because they do have a little bit of skin in the game. So they're more willing to like, hey, we spent money on this, we need to follow up on it. So that's been, more helpful in obtaining customers. I've done some trial work for some growers who just, I guess, weren't really interested in just utilizing the technology for whatever reason. I never really got a straight answer, but I don't know if it was pricing or if it's just the fact that they feel like they could do it by hand or something, counting or something like that, just on their own for the same price.
How about you, Stratton? Do you use aggressive pricing to win a new customer?
So I'll do a one free flight, and then I process the data right there, and then I basically tell them I need a window of time with you right after I fly, so I can go over the data and explain to you what I'm seeing, and then we'll go out into the field, and I'll ground truth it with them, and basically show them what I saw. And I think that's worked really well here. I mean, they love to just see it visually in the field. I mean, just that story of the, lost cabbage because of moisture. That all happened because of ground truthing. It was a free flight. I found it, went out there, ground truthed it, and it was just like oh my God. Because from the road, if you're just driving by or just doing a quick scout, they all looked great. And then you go out into the field and you see all the cabbage, all the heads are just dead. They're just rotten and dead. So that was the big one. And as far as the other question is concerned, yeah, I mean, I've been denied before. I mean, it's part of the business, but a particular one was we flew this field for this guy, and I kind of went over the inputs he was using before we flew, and it was excessive. I mean, just so many inputs, and we flew his field. His potatoes looked gorgeous. They were beautiful. I didn't find a single problem in his field. Not a single problem. But the reason I didn't find a problem is because of how much he uses. I mean, He is constantly spraying, constantly putting dry down. I mean, it was just way too much. But his attitude was, well, this is what I've been doing for 30 years. It's worked for me, and I'm not going to change.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay.
I really like the idea of saying, hey, I'm going to do a free flight, but payment is basically like an hour or whatever of your time. on that day right after the flight. And I think the Pix40 fields enabling you to process super fast enables that to happen. If you don't review the data very shortly after collecting it and you don't have the potential client's full attention, it's just going to be sort of like a goose chase trying to track them down and getting their attention again. I like that approach. Nathan, I think that's also a good approach, is just like, making them have some skin in the game. We've done some demo flights for people before, and it's kind of like I think both of those are true. You need some sort of guarantee that they're going to give you their attention to actually look at the data afterwards, or you need to make sure that like you're at least covering your costs.
I've ran into a few clients where it's like, hey, can you do a free demo? I mean, I've done a lot of free demos for people, don't get me wrong. But I've had a lot of customers say, hey, can you do a demo for me on, this field? Can you give me a tree count on this field? Well, they want to utilize that data, and they don't have
full
any
deliverable for free.
And then you find out after the fact that they really have no intention on using it anywhere else. And so that's where I've run into an internal conflict with myself. It's like, well, how do I handle this? And it's a per basis situation. Certainly, I mean, I'll do free flights for a customer. I've done it, and I still do it. I just don't do it as often, or I try to limit it to, well, how about we do, 10 acres? A lot of times, we do a smaller field or something that, just kind of doesn't, give my work away.
Yeah.
You can tell when a client doesn't really want to utilize your service. They just want one particular portion of it or something too. And it's not very common, but it does happen.
I think if you just get the farmer's attention and you have that attention for an hour, you have to remember these guys are, especially during a plant, these guys are so busy, and I mean, their time is money. So really, they're in a sense losing money by giving you an hour of time, because they've got 5 million other things to do. But here they are sitting down with you going over this data. So, and then also like knowing, not like stuttering through the data, like but like knowing exactly what is happening and what you're looking at, and then taking them out to that field and saying, this is what I found. Even if you don't necessarily know what's wrong, just showing them that, hey, this is an area there's something wrong here, and then they pull the plant and they've got a fungus. And it's like, oh man, I had no idea. It could be in the very middle of the field that looks great. And they pull that one plant, it's got a fungus on it. And it's just like, well, there you go. That's what I'm useful for.
Are you you're processing field side in fields, the farmer's right there with you, or do you do some scouting on your own, then go find the farmer and come back to the field?
We usually process right there, and then we have a Mavic Pro, and if I see something, I'll shoot that Mavic Pro up and go over there, and I'll just get in a real low hover, and I'll kind of just scout around that area that I saw and see kind of what I'm looking at, and then generally if it's something widespread, I'll give them a call and let them know, and then if not, if I don't find anything or whatever, I'll just deliver the data that I've given that night or early the next morning. So a lot of it, it depends. If it's rain, I mean, we had the other day, it was kind of sprinkling, and we definitely pushed the limits of both the camera and the drone. We actually flew in it, but we got great data back. So I mean, it was fine, but I didn't process it right there in the field because we were just trying to get out of there, and I just processed it that night. But
okay,
yeah, we just let her rip. That's basically what happened. We had like four legs left, and Colton was actually the one flying. I looked over at him, and he looked at me, and he said, "All right, we're just gonna keep going." I said, "Okay, all right, let's go."
Yeah, that's where you're like, check our insurance coverage on this real quick.
Yeah, right.
So to close things out, we'll just ask you a few maybe slightly off-topic questions. So one, which is sort of on topic, is if you could have any drone for your business, what would you choose?
An Alti.
Alti UAS out of they're
Yep.
South African, right?
It's either there or Australia. I can't remember. But yeah,
Alti
and
UAS.
I'd have like the $100,000 Alti for like 12 hours. Just let it go.
Nathan, how about you?
Well, I guess this probably isn't the most expensive dream drone I would buy, but I'm working up to a Trinity from Quantum Systems VTOL
Great.
drone right now.
Nice.
It's practical, especially for data collection with aerobotics because of the dual payload system. So that's kind of what I'm going for next.
Yeah, that's our next drone too.
One thing I like to ask people is what their favorite sci-fi or book or movie is, but maybe I'll make it a little more broad this time. So I'd be interested to hear what your favorite book novel is. Nathan, why don't you go first?
Oh, I like the book Hatchet by Gary Paulson. It's like a book we read in school. It's about a kid who's on a plane ride to go see his dad, I think, and the pilot has a heart attack and he crashes in the Canadian forest and has to survive out there with only a hatchet that his mother gave him. So it's a good book. There's a series too. There's like, he ends up getting rescued, but there's a series. Brian's Return, Brian's Hunt. Pretty good book series.
How did he get through TSA with a hatchet?
Oh, it was like a small Cessna 410 or something like that.
Okay.
This was back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well,
Everybody
this
used to bring
probably
hatchets on the plane all the time. Okay, Hatchet. Who's the author again?
Gary Paulson.
Okay. How about you, Stratten?
My favorite one is In the Company of Heroes by Michael Durant. It's about he was a Black Hawk pilot at Mogadishu, and he's the one that got captured. And it's the only book I've ever read that the end made me cry. I mean, it's absolutely amazing story. So I just suggest it for anybody to read. It's uplifting, and then it's also very motivating. Just to what he went through, it's like, man, if this guy can go through that, I can go through anything. So, great book.
All right. Well, I appreciate you guys joining. Thank you, Stratten. Thank you, Nathan. Hoping our listeners enjoyed it. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for the invite, Drew.